Today we are talking about showing up and having the courage to choose courage over comfort. And today I'm actually today going to do things a little bit differently in the spirit of showing up and just being courageous and taking a different approach to things. Because these are really difficult times. And I think, of late, I've been reminded of how challenging it is and how unpredictable life really is when you wake up in the morning and you have grand plans of how you think things are going to look, and then it just doesn't look that way. And to be really frank, the last couple of days, I've really felt very unsettled, and I haven't been able to put my finger on it. All I've known to do is to some of the critical things that I know to do, just like put my attention on doing what I know to do, put one foot in front of the other. And so today I've been really looking forward to talking about this topic with Gary Ware, who's joining me from the States, an expert in breakthrough play. He did a TEDx talk last year talking about how play saved his life. He's got a background in improv. And he's got a previous career in as a marketer in digital marketing, had his own business, went through a massive transition with that, and has landed on what he said was the universe had something bigger at play for him, and now is an expert in delivering breakthrough play as a corporate facilitator. But what I am going to do today is actually just jump straight into the conversation with Gary and have Gary share with us about his journey specifically and where he got to from today. And the thing that I'm really fascinated in talking with Gary about is, what does it mean to show up? So, Gary, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I bring my own audience.
Background.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so excited to just dive headfirst into this. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and I think the topic of showing up was really great one to talk with you about, because you've got a background in improv. Let's just start there. I'm very ill educated when it comes to improv and what it's even about. What is it?
Yeah. So the improv that I do as a performance piece is improv comedy, improv theater. I with a group of other people, we step on a stage, we get a suggestion, and for about 45 minutes or so, we just create what is, I like to say, like a one-act play, a play that is the first and last day in existence. It's the only time that you're going to see it, and that is my form of play. But the cool thing about improv is that it is a great teaching tool, is a great facilitation tool. We'll talk about that in a moment. But how I got into it, to be honest, it was more like an accident, because I didn't grow up in theater. That's not my world. I, like you said, digital marketer. That was what I thought my career path was. And wanting to get better at public speaking, just because of my job, it was a requirement to present to clients, to be able to articulate and deliver messages and all these other things. I wanted to get better at that. I knew that I, had a ways to go. I did not like Toastmasters. If anyone is a fan of Toastmasters, way to go. That's cool for you. But unfortunately, that it just didn't jive well. I felt like I got so much anxiety from going to those meetings. I felt like I was being judged all the time. I learned a lot, but it just wasn't for me. And it wasn't until a mentor said, "Hey, Gary, how about you take an improv class?" And I was like, "Improv class?" And maybe just like what you're thinking, what does improv have to do with
Yeah.
public speaking? And I talk about this in my TEDx talk. I walked into that theater, almost, to be honest, didn't go. I was like almost talked myself out of it. But when I walked in there, I was with about 13, 15 other people, just like you and me, regular people. Again, no aspirations to be a sketch comedy star on Saturday Night Live or anything like that. They're just regular people.
Mm.
And they wanted to just have some fun. And for 2 hours, it was amazing. We played these games, we connected on a deeper level, and I left feeling invigorated. I left feeling like, wow, this is amazing. It reminded me of here in the States, when you're a kid and when you're in primary school, you have a thing called recess where you just go outside and just have free play.
Yes.
And that's what it felt like. That's what it felt like. For 2 hours, I was completely
Right.
present, and I left feeling on top of the world, and I was hooked.
Uh, can you tell me though, when you walked in there, because you say, you're kind of given a topic to do something and then you're put on the spot just to create it, right? Was there a moment of panic? I mean, all I'm present to is the thought of how panicked I'd feel, I think, right in the moment of just having to create. Was there a.
So there is, but then this is one of the secrets of improv.
Mhm,
You're doing it with other people. And
mm,
one of the things that we do is before we go out on stage, we go around, we look each other in the eye, and we give each other a pat on the back and we say, I got your back.
mhm,
And so imagine, even though it's scary, I still get butterflies. I've been doing this for about a decade. I still get butterflies. But imagine knowing that the people that you're doing it with have your back, how you would show up, because of that. And
mm,
so that's one of the misconceptions of improv, is that you're going to be put on the spot and you have to, quote unquote, be funny. And yes, you are in the spotlight, but we have some hacks. We have a framework that allows us to be in the moment and create. And that is what's at the same time supportive yet freeing.
mm,
But on that first class, it wasn't like, all right, everyone, get on stage. We're going to look at you. Say something funny. It wasn't like that. It was very supportive. The first thing that we learned was that it was okay to make a mistake.
mm,
Mistakes are, mistakes are just feedback. That's how we grow.
mm,
When we were kids,
mm,
it wasn't a problem. We made, like, I have a 3-year-old. We were talking about this before we went live. And being a dad, like, has been such an amazing experience because I've just learned so much about play, about just the human experience from watching my son. And everything that he does is through play. And yes, he is getting a bit older and he's starting to realize, like, oh, I want to do this and I can't do it yet. He gets a little bit frustrated, but he still does it. He still shows up. He makes
mm,
mistakes and it's okay with it. But somewhere
mm,
along the line, we became adults.
mm,
And somewhere someone said mistakes are bad. And then so now that fear that we're going to make a mistake holds us back.
mm, mm. So how did you make the transition then out of the career that you were in? So you said you were in marketing and digital marketing, and then now you're doing this play. So how did that happen?
Oh, well, so like I said, I took this improv class, I got hooked. And so I wanted to perform. I just knew, like, yes, I want to do as much as this as I can. I would love to do this in front of people. For me, everything about improv was play. But I quickly saw that these games that we were playing allowed us, this group of strangers, 16 strangers that spent 8 weeks together that didn't know each other before it. At the end of those 8 weeks, we felt closer together than I felt with some people that I worked with for years. And I was like, imagine if I can bottle this up and bring this to my team. So I would, like, as a new leader, I I was like, what can I bring my team that's going to help us out? So I brought improv. That was my way of developing my team. Again, not knowing the psychological benefits of what I was doing, I just instinctively
Mm,
said, well, this is fun.
mm,
These are really cool games. They have some lessons to them. It teaches us about listening, about creativity, how to collaborate together. And so, how to support each other, all these things that we probably should be taught. I call them essential skills. Other people call them
mm,
soft skills. But, you know, we're learning them through these unconventional games. So I brought them to my team and I was known as the improv guy. And I, again, was doing this on the side. Everything that I was learning was always in service of a team that I was on, because my ambition was to be the best boss in the world. I just wanted to be the best boss. And it didn't mean that I was, a pushover. I just wanted to be someone that was a great leader. someone that was supportive, someone that inspires his team, someone that, helped, yes, at the end of the day, drive revenue, all those business objectives. So I was always learning. And I thought in my career, the progression needed to be, oh, I worked at all these agencies. I guess I have to have my own. And then the opportunity came about. Some people that I've known for a while in this marketing association that I was a part of, they started their agency and they were looking for person number 3. And we were in this meeting and I was like, oh, the person that you need needs to be able to manage the team and help with strategy, all these things. Little did I know, I'm describing myself and they're like, yeah, like you. I was like, oh yeah, like me. Sure. Okay. And I thought in that moment, when I took the leap from going from working at an agency where it wasn't my company. I had a lot of control. I was making a decent amount of money to doing this. I thought like, oh my gosh, that is so scary. And we were in business together for about 3 years. And the first 2 years, it was like the honeymoon period where, again, we had, decent sized team. We had nice clients. Again, I was doing the things that I wanted to do. And I was doing this on the side. I would lead like retreats. Like I mentioned, that's how I met Jeff Harry, who was a previous guest on your show. And this was just all fun for me. It was all play. And people would bring me in and I would run like team building things for companies, but it was never anything that I focused on. And a few things happened that, like you said in the beginning, the universe had bigger plans for me. You could, this that I was doing, running a business, it was play for me. It was like so amazing. Like I was so engrossed in it. I loved it. And then I found myself burning myself out again, because again, if you are not, you could be working, and you could love the work, but if you're not taking care of your mental and your physical and stuff like that, it's going to play a toll on you. And there was a moment where, so the commute to the agency that I owned was quite a bit. And so I would just drive. This was pre-sun. So I was like, oh yeah, it's all good. And the to-do lists would be piling up. And I was like, you know what? Let me just power through. Again, I know this now that, we're not as efficient as we think we are. If we don't get enough breaks, we're going to make more mistakes. And so then I was like, all right, you know what? Let me come in early. I would come in early. And this, like over the short period of time, like really wore me down. And there was a moment that changed everything. And it changed my whole perspective on work and, what we should be doing. And I was so exhausted. I'm driving home, AC blasting, trying to keep myself awake. And for a split second, I dozed off. Like it had to have been like less than a second. Like it was quick, but like I know that I dozed off, and it startled me. Like it really startled me to the point where I had to pull over. And there was something there where I thought I could have caused a major accident and died and killed other people in this way, all because I wanted to be efficient, all because I wanted to finish my to-do list. And I was thinking, like in this sort of like moment of like, what's going on here? I was like, if I would have died, would they at my funeral say, wow, Gary was so good with his to-do list and stuff like that? No, they wouldn't say that. They would say, wow, Gary was a good person. He cared X, Y, and Z. And I said, why am I killing myself over this work? And from then on out, I had a different perspective on the work. Yes, the work was important. Yes, I worked my butt off, but I didn't feel like I needed, the work didn't need to define me. I needed to have more of that harmony. And so I think that was the beginning of the divide because I feel like my business partner had a different sort of perspective on all of that. And then my son was born and I really realized, I'm like, man, something needs to change. Like I can't be working all the time. I don't want to be an absent father. And so I, started making some shifts about like, more work from home. And look, we're in a global pandemic and everyone is the world's biggest work from home experiment. But nonetheless, and the business got a little bit rocky at that point, and so it was 2
And
years
you
ago.
were
I
still
went up.
doing were you still doing the improv and the
Mhm.
additional stuff on the side at that stage? Yeah.
Yep. I
Yeah.
thought I was Superman. I thought I was Iron Man. I was prioritizing more of that because that was bringing me more joy.
Right.
Um, and I got back from this retreat in Nicaragua, where I was, doing, it was part play, part improv. Um, we did uh, some workshops for a English speaking school there. Like it was really cool. And I came back, and it was funny because the day before I came back, it was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. And I'm on the beach of San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua, and I was like, "Wow, this is it!" Like I think I got it. I think I figured it out. Like I have this job where it's not about like working to kill myself. It's bring me decent money, but I have this. I'm doing this. I'm like I feeling good. Well, guess what? 2 days later, uh, I'm back in the States, and I'm having my normal check-in with my business partner, and he hands me a check and says, I think we should go our separate ways.
Oh. Oh.
Mhm.
Was
And
there
wait,
was
there's
that
more.
was there any warning sign about that, or was that just
No,
like out of the blue? Just right. Right.
the blue, completely
Right.
blindside.
Right.
Granted, in hindsight, yeah, I missed all those red flags. There were tons of red flags.
Yeah.
And I guess me going away for a week was the perfect sort of transition for him to like sort of get all this in order and like, hey, we're just
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
go our separate ways. But 2 hours after that, my landlord called and told that me and my wife we have to move because he had to sell the
Mm.
house. So here I am, unemployed, about to not have a place to live. My wife isn't working. We have a 1-year-old, Garrett, my son, just turned, or he was about to turn one. He wasn't officially one yet. He was about maybe a week from being one. And I was like, what? And I was thinking, do I just go get another job? I felt broken. I felt like I failed.
Mm.
But thank goodness, one, I have an amazing support between people like Jeff and other people in my network and my wife. They saw what I really liked, and they were like, well, why don't you pursue whatever that breakthrough play stuff is?
Yeah.
Because it brings you a lot of
Whatever
joy.
that stuff is.
Whatever it is, why don't you go down that avenue?
Yeah.
Again, not knowing, like, all right, you know, sure, I'll figure it out. And again, on the theme of just showing up, I just took a step and I reached out to some people in my network and I told them, what's going on, and how I'm starting this new endeavor. And it's all about, team building, employee development.
Mm.
And what I did at first, because I had a little bit of a run, right? Maybe about 3 months, we ended up moving back in with my parents for a little bit, to get stable, and that little bit turned into 2 years. But
Yeah.
nonetheless,
Been there. Yeah.
it's a blur. But I would go to companies and I did what I called complimentary recess, and I brought this little mini program that I had, and it was about like 4 games, just as a smorgasbord of what the possibility was, and I gave it away.
Mm.
And
A bit
if they
like what
liked
they
it,
call beta testing these days, right?
huh?
A bit like what they call beta testing these days. Running a pilot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, give me feedback. I want to make this better. Better yet, like if you loved it, I love a testimonial, maybe a referral. And
Mm.
that was the beginning of me doing it full time.
Yeah, now I want to talk a little bit about that because the interesting thing I'm finding about what you just shared there is the transition from a career where you've got a technical expertise, in an area, you're working in advertising and marketing, and you're a digital marketer, and then you run a business in digital marketing. And oh, hey, what Gary Ware is what? He's going out and doing team building. Is he got a background in HR, and has he got a degree in psychology? And how does that happen? Now, how did you navigate that for yourself? Because dare say, look, this is a couple of things. This has happened for me, right? So firstly, I did make the transition myself, background in marketing, worked in media for 20 odd years. Same thing. I'd worked as a coach. I got actually a side hustle as a coach, working in transformation for about 10 years. But when I exited and decided I wanted to pursue that more as a passion, one of the things that I did deal with was, well, who am I to do that? Because in the market, you've got a massive market of people who have spent their 20 years in human resources, or their 20 years running, blah, 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 right? So I want to talk a little bit about this because, as you know, in the pandemic, what we are currently dealing with, and this is why I do think the conversation around showing up is important, because you've got people who look at the airline industry as one. Okay, so people who have been pilots or flight attendants or ground crew, I mean, these are people who are now in a transition, and those jobs are not really on the horizon in the near future. And so the biggest challenge these people are going to face is, well, what do I do right now? Because, I can't just go and fly a plane. So I just want to talk about your journey, your transition at that point, Gary, because what was it like for you stepping into a world where this really was the beginning of a new you, right?
It was. And if you would ask some people, it was more of we've seen it the whole time. We were just waiting for you to show up and just be yourself.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, because I've always been that person that have been on the mentorship side. I've always been that person. Matter of fact, the funny thing is, when I graduated high school, I actually wanted to be a music teacher. I had studied
Really?
music
Right.
uh, up in that point, from elementary through high school, and I wanted to be a music teacher. I was going to go to university for that. And someone had said, you're not going to be able to make much money being a music teacher. They're cutting back on arts programs. You're probably not going to teach music if you are a teacher. And so in that moment, like, I sort of transitioned. But I think, it's interesting. Like, you set a course on a GPS, right? And say you make a wrong turn. And what does the GPS say? Oh, recalculating. And I felt like I set that course that I'm on now 20
Uh,
plus years ago.
uh,
And, I just went digital marketing, but it's like, recalculating. And so I've all that, like, when I think about the things that I love the most about when I was in digital marketing, yes, like, doing the actual work, not so much, but the strategy, the connecting, the helping people grow is something that I guess I've been working on for like the past 20 odd years. So,
mm,
getting to your point, I did feel a lot like a fraud when I first started doing it. You're right. Like, there was that gremlin that was saying, yeah, who are you to just jump into that? Who are you to just say that you can, bring all of these, sort of skills to teams? And
mm,
what, like, the thing that helped me the most is the fact that I have been doing improv. And as I mentioned before, improv is less about like sort of faking it. Most people think, oh, you're winging it. It's more
right.
of having these guideposts, these tenets, these sort of philosophies that you live by. And one of the philosophies in improvisation is just showing up, is
Mm-hmm.
taking a step,
Mm-hmm.
is making bold choices,
Mm,
is having the belief that failure is just feedback, is having the belief that there are no mistakes, everything's a gift. And those are the things that sort of kept me going. So when I would make a mistake, and maybe things didn't go as well with a workshop or with a pitch or something, it's more of like, we have this improv game called Unfortunately, Fortunately. So it's a really great reframe. And in the work that I've been doing, post pandemic, it's been a game that has been super helpful for people, where the game is very simple. You say, unfortunately, something happened. And then you say, fortunately, something happened. So, like, it's a way of sort of seeing things from different perspectives. And again, it's not
yes.
sugarcoating.
Yeah.
It's just being real.
Yeah. Look, I really like that. So how to reframe by saying, unfortunately X, but fortunately Y. Yeah.
Yep.
And I do like the way that you say it's not about sugarcoating and it's not about faking it till you making it. There's more of a realistic transition to seeing the opportunity out of a crisis, almost, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that correlates to what we were talking about at the beginning around how it's easy. It's often easy, right, Gary, when we're at this point and you've gone through the hard yards and you've just navigated your way through the early stages to get to where you're at now, to look back and say clearly the writing was already on the wall in terms of you moving into a space that's where it's like oh well, when were you going to show up, because we always knew that was the case. So
Yep.
and how long ago was that journey? When did that start for you? When you well, let's just say the first pilot, how long ago was that?
It's been 2 years.
Two
It's
years
been, yeah. So it's still fresh.
Wow.
But the cool thing is, yes, it's been 2 years of me doing this full time. But
Right.
like I said, I've been doing improv in some way, shape, or form for about 10 years.
Yeah.
So I have been, and it was just one of those things of getting myself to realize that, oh, you've already been doing this, Gary. Like,
Yeah.
this is just a new medium, but you have the skills,
Mm.
you have the ability. And this is one of the things, like, and I knew that I was onto something when I was in marketing, and we would have, and because you have an experience in this too, you can probably relate. We go to these pitch meetings for clients. Like, we have the whole dog and pony show, and we have the presentation, and the goal is to bring the strategy and get the client to approve. And in some cases, it's exhausting, right? You leave that like, oh my God, I need a beer, I need a drink, because the client is like, oh, all right, impress me. So like they are trying to poke holes in it. They're trying to do all of these things. And in some regards, so a mentor of mine, her name is Gwen Gordon, she talks about seeing the world as a proving ground versus seeing the world as a playground. And I felt like when I was in those marketing meetings, I was seeing the world as a proving ground. Like, I have to prove that we are worthy. I have to prove
Wow.
that this is going to work. We're
Wow.
always proving ourselves, and the client is trying to, you know, make it not work. That's not always the case, but you leave these meetings feeling exhausted. And I remember the first time I did a play shop, improv based workshop. And I didn't get paid for, like I said, for a lot of these, but I remember the first one where I did get paid. And it was about the same amount of time. It was 2.5 hours. One, that went like this. It didn't feel like two and a
Yeah.
half hours. It felt like 45 minutes. And
Right.
two, when I was done, I was like riding on this high, like, oh my gosh, this was this. Like, it was almost like,
Where's that clapping button? Where's that clapping button now? Where's the
yeah,
clap?
right, here we go.
Time for a clap.
More importantly, it was very magical. So I'm going to use,
Oh,
it was a magical experience, because I like
yes.
felt like I was just so in the moment, so like focused. Like, you talk to these professional athletes, you talk to these, you know, surgeons, these people that are doing this work that takes precision, that, it's like muscle memory or whatever. And it's like almost like the conscious mind blinked out and they were just completely in flow.
Mm,
That's what it felt like. And so
mm.
much so, when I went and saw my wife later, she's like, "Are you drunk?" I was like, "No, I'm not, but I feel like amazing." And that was like, again, the signs, like, wow, I'm on the right track. And so
Oh,
I feel like I've just been following my curiosity.
yeah.
One
Wow.
breadcrumb, just showing up is like, all right, oh, here's another sort of like thing that, like, all right, you're on the right track. Because there are a lot of times that didn't feel like that, but then it's the few times when it did, and you're like, okay, all right, we're on the right track.
I'm so glad you said that too. God, there's so much great stuff in what you're saying. So let me just pause, repeat,
Please.
because I'm just so in love with what you've said. Firstly, I want to make a mark on this around shifting one's life from a proving ground to a playground. Fabulous. And then secondly, I'm really glad you mentioned the moments of where it feels amazing versus it's not that all the time. And I do think it's important for us to remind ourselves of that because um, sometimes there's an expectation that it should always look great or always feel really great, but that's not always the reality, right?
Correct. It's
Yeah.
not.
And so, fantastic. So that just love that. Now, the thing that I want to then jump to is your TEDx talk last year. So tell us a little bit about that. What was that about?
Yeah. So you got like a deep dive into the nuts and bolts of what I put together in the TEDx talk. I talked a lot about my proving ground moment when I was early in
Oh,
my
yes,
career
yes.
and I was burning myself out, trying to prove myself that I was worthy of being a director, and how improv was that saving grace that was the catalyst that made me realize, like, oh, play is the answer. But the interesting thing is sometimes, like, what do they say? Like, you're bound to repeat history until you learn something. So
Yes, yes.
I didn't learn my lesson, and I kept burning myself out because, again, I was seeing the lens through the proving ground. Even like when I was this um, co-founder of a digital marketing agency, it was more like trying to prove to myself that I can do this. And it's a slight shift in perspective. But the cool thing that I learned from Gwen Gorton is that when you see the world through the lens of a proving ground, you see the people around you as competitors.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to prove that you're worthy. And it
Mm-hmm.
takes more effort because you're not necessarily being your authentic self. You're not getting into that state of flow. It feels like more resistance. But when you see the world as a playground, the people around you are playmates. They're not competitors, they're playmates.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking through that childlike mind of curiosity, discovery. And yes, you will make mistakes, but those aren't defining who you are. That's just helping you continue to grow. And so, again, it's a subtle shift. And I feel like in any moment, like you can sort of snap out of it and you go back. So it's like an ongoing practice, like meditation, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
you
Yeah,
can't
it's like
like
a shift in
master
mindset, kind
meditation.
of.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. So shifting the way you're thinking, and so shifting the mindset to a playful mindset and creating games as opposed to the significance and proving oneself.
right. And so
Yeah.
I talked about that in my talk, and I got real saying that it's unfortunate that so many people are in jobs that they dreamed of
Mm,
and they feel so unfulfilled.
mm.
There's stats that show that a good majority of people are disengaged at work. They don't like their job. And I'm curious on how those numbers are looking now with the global pandemic, people having to work from
Yeah.
home. You're not necessarily getting that connection that you were used to when we were meeting in person.
Mm,
But it's interesting that people are still unfulfilled. And in the book Play by Dr. Stuart Brown, he talks about how adults are suffering from what he calls play deprivation. And I can attest that because when I took that first improv class, I hadn't played in a long time. Like play for me was like, oh, when the work is done or when I finally get a chance to take a vacation, then you
yeah,
play
that's
hard,
something different.
but it's not
Yeah.
like sort of true play. And,
Right.
but I said that the interesting thing is you can be doing something so remedial, like mopping the floor. And a wise person once said, for every job that must be done, you add a bit of fun and snap, the job's a game.
Yeah.
That was Mary Poppins, FYI. But that's the thing. Play as a mindset
Yeah, I love that.
of how can you be playful, and it doesn't necessarily mean always joking around. That's one form of being playful. But in my TED talk, I give 5 strategies if you are looking to activate your play drive of how you can do that. And I talk about
Okay.
rest, the importance of rest as adults. play is not something, we're a bit atrophied when it comes to play. So it's important to schedule play.
No.
And, I talk about that, and I talk about getting playmates, people that are going to challenge you in a good way and in all of that. And so that was like my TEDx talk. It was just all the wisdom that I had gotten like over like I think the last like 14 years of like my career
Yes.
distilled into 18 minutes.
Yes. And so are those 5 things now something that you live by for yourself?
Yeah, and it's so the 5 things are rest, mindset,
Mm-hmm.
you need to schedule play, you need to follow your curiosity, and the fifth one is you need to have a playmate. And what I mean by playmate, playmate is someone that, especially when you're down, they can issue play challenges, things that are going to, sort of bring you back up. Someone that you can connect with on a deeper level that has your back. And that is something that I feel like as an adult, we have a challenge, like a challenge doing. Like it's when we were kids, it was easy. We were, like I said earlier, you had recess. You go out on recess, oh, what? You're playing hopscotch? Can I play? All right, cool. All right. Boom, you had a friend.
Yeah.
Adults, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. It like our friendships
We
are
get stuck in
mostly
the head too much.
we do of like, oh,
Yeah.
do they like me? But it's mostly proximity. If you think about it, the friendships that we have are proximity, as in I work with them or I've known them because of where I live and stuff like that. And then you're lucky if, as you grow, the people that are in your circle grow too, and it's still a match. But I know from my own experience, some of those proximity friends, like, you know, our paths change or the things that we value changed, and you still keep them around because you're like, well, we need
Mm.
friendships, we need connection. And that is the unfortunate thing. Um, and so I feel like, especially again now in what all that's going on in the world, there's so many people that are lonely, but yet we're so connected. And so
Mm.
how can we just start to connect on a deeper level? And that's again bringing it back to play.
Yeah, I
Play,
do.
I feel like, is that great equalizer.
Yeah, and I think there are so many things that we can bring it to. And I like the way that you use the example of mopping. I, because let's face it, often one of the drags of the jobs is that we don't like to having to do certain chores around the house. But nothing goes astray by putting on your favorite music and finding the joy in those things that we do that seem so menial. Is a fabulous way to do that because we are stuck, and for many, like certainly there's an area now in Melbourne at the moment. I feel for the people in Melbourne specifically because they've just gone back into a forced lockdown where, it's taken it to a whole new level, whereas some places are not as bad. But I think it is times like this, Gary, that those lessons become really critical because how we used to get certain connections with others has just shifted, and yet we can still tap into those things. So I've got
Agreed.
a few questions to run off to you.
Please.
Bit of a you know, what's present for you immediately when I ask you these questions as a standout in terms of, as in your journey. So one of the things that as a conversation I like to do is focus on leadership. But when I'm talking about leadership, really, and the conversation about showing up is probably a perfect example. That being a leader is somebody who's willing to find the potential in themselves and has the courage to develop that, and take a stand for forwarding those things. So I just really want to talk a couple of questions about your journey and what you're present to now, being where you're at. What is a couple of different ways to look at this? One is is a standout for you as one of your most proudest accomplishments?
It's interesting. So when we were originally planning this interview, was, man, it's been a hot minute, and so I had one, and we sort of talked about it. Like, one of my proudest moments is one of my, what I thought at the time was one of my biggest failures. Going through a business breakup and then having the courage to make a major life pivot and everything like that, and all the things that I've accomplished since then. A moment recently that I feel like has potential to be one of the proudest moments. And again, it's all about showing up. So, in the US, we're going through this sort of civil unrest,
Yes.
focusing on, a lot of the systemic racism, with the Black population, and helping to, rise that up. When all of the riots and stuff started happening in June, I started getting a number of calls from people that I knew asking if I did work in that area in diversity, equity, and
Uh,
inclusion.
uh,
And again, being honest, I said no. Yes, I have experience being a Black person because I've been one my whole life. However, facilitating conversations and giving specific strategies and recommendations
uh,
in that area, no, I'm not an expert.
uh,
However, I understand that you are in a spot where you want to have a conversation, and it's probably an uncomfortable conversation with your team. Well, that I am good at. Like I
yes.
can hold space for people. I can provide this experience where people can feel safe, have that psychological safety so that they can have these conversations. And so
Yes.
that is what I did. And it was scary. It was scary in so many reasons, on so many levels. And so for a number of companies, it was about a 90-minute conversation where, as a facilitator, I facilitated the experience, one of first creating a safe space where people felt heard, and setting some ground rules of how the discussions were going to happen. And we played some activities, to get people in the right mindset. And then they, it's all virtual, and they went into small breakout rooms, and they had discussions. And some of the questions are, uncomfortable questions, like,
Mhm.
what does it mean to have white privilege, and where have you experienced this in your work, in your career? And then they will go and have these mini discussions, and then we'll bring everyone back, as a unit, and discuss it. And it's one thing to get everything out, but it's another thing to have action. And that's what I wanted. I said, I don't want it to just be like, hey, we talked about it. But if you really want to have lasting change, you need to hear people, and then, what are the next steps? What do we do from here? And so it was great to see these organizations, and their teams, actually have open discussions. And again, no one has the answer, but it was like, well, what do you think we should do? How can we show up? How can we take a step? And it was really great because I did this activity where I used this software. I think it's called Mentimeter, where
Oh,
you
yeah.
can do
Mm.
like sort of virtual stuff. And I asked everyone a question in the beginning. Everyone knew what this experience was going to be about. So I asked them, how are you feeling right now? And then they went on Mentimeter, and they could put 3 words in, and it made a huge word cloud. And in the beginning, a lot of the words, were exhausted, scared, upset, things like that. And then at the end, we did another check-in. Same question. Wanted to see what was different. And it was so cool to see the transformation in 90 minutes. It went from scared, anxious, to hopeful, to feeling like there's progress, things like that. And that, like, I felt so proud of myself, one, for having the courage to step up and to hold the space, and to see these teams have a like more clarity on what's next. And that feels so good, to think that I've made a small dent, in the
Mm.
universe.
Mm.
And one other thing in that regard, because again, I believe that, when there are inequities and inequalities in the world, you need to stand up and you need to talk about it.
Mm.
So with all that was going on, like, I personally, felt super exhausted. I didn't know what to do. And seeing all these conversations that were, taking place, I feel like people weren't hearing each other. there was a lot of talking past each other. And again, when I'm stuck, I tend to go to the book of Improv, where, like I said before, there's these principles that help us create things on stage without a script. And so I created this video, and I'm happy to share the link with you. And, if you want to share for those of you who are listening, if you're curious on how can you use the principles of improvisation to help you be anti-racist? How can you use the principles of improvisation to help you have uncomfortable conversations? And so I created this video, and again, there was, other than these are the 5 principles I'm going to talk about, like there was no pre-planning, there was no script. I turned on the camera. I was just completely open and honest with how I was feeling, what was going on. And to hear people say, this gave me actionable things that I can do right now, felt amazing.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. It was like a whole nutshell. Gold. So much gold in there. So thank you. And one final question before we do jump off. Given what you actually just shared, what I'm present to, but complete the sentence for me. Leader is someone who?
A leader is someone who feels the fear and does it anyway. And as a result of them living their values, makes you feel that anything is possible.
Fantastic. Sums up showing up perfectly. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for showing up and helping us show up.
Yeah.
One more final round of applause. Well, thanks, Gary Ware, for joining me today. We'll put all the details of the show notes of the fabulous things that you've mentioned in today's talk, the videos and links, etc. Congratulations on making the transition to what is, I think, a really perfectly timed transition into this space, because I really do think that your work is going to provide an enormous amount of difference, especially for those who are now having to come out of a massive transition. You've gone through the hard yards of navigating that change, and I do want to acknowledge you and what it takes to show up and have courage to do something and take on a completely new thing in your life and be really fantastic at it, by the way. So thank you.
My pleasure. And if I can just take a moment and just acknowledge you, thank you so much for having this container, holding this space for us to have these conversations, because it's messy out there and there's so many people that need that rock, that light, that guiding light. And so thank you for being just a few steps ahead of us with that flashlight. Because we need you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Gary. All right, I'm looking forward to getting out there and doing a bit of play. I'm going to take a few lessons myself. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic.
Woohoo!
Wow, that was really great. So much fabulous stuff in what you said. And you know what? How great it was it?
I can't hear you. What did you say?
I keep forgetting that that's my sound. Listen, I just think that was really, it was, the theme just was perfect for you. I think for what you were sharing about everything just was so perfect. And I really do want you to know how much I'm mean what I said about what it takes to do what you're doing in the face of, what it takes to transition and not give up and keep going. Because I'm in the space too myself, and it's the same transition out of an industry of X and into Y, and it's just been really great to sit here and talk to you. And I could have gone on so many different conversations, especially when you started raising that stuff about what you're currently dealing with in the Black Lives Matter stuff. Like, honestly, I could have just kept going, but of course, I have to stick on point.
Yes, I get it.
Yeah. So
but this is delightful. I'm glad it worked out. Like, again, things just happen to work out. Like, the way that it is. Because that, when I wasn't able to do the show, it was because I was doing one of those workshops that it was like that was the only time that they had available. And so, and it just sort of crisscrossed and stuff like that. But that's awesome. Like we got the chance to have this amazing conversation. So it all works out.
Thanks for bringing the play mindset too. I love that proving ground to playground. That was just brilliant.
Yay!
And thanks to your mentor.
Yeah, Gwen, she's amazing.
I'll send you through the links and tag you and let you know when we're going to go out with it. I hope to go out with it pretty soon, actually, because honestly, it is rock solid for what we're dealing with now. So I'm very excited.
Woohoo! Yeah, let me know. I'm ready. So, all right.
Thank you.
Bye.